Hello and welcome to High Value Writing. I'm Erin Lebacqz, and today I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Valerie Bath, who's a consultant who helps people communicate across cultures.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Erin.
You're welcome. I really wanted to bring in Val's expertise because I know many of us email across cultures, not just with people in our same culture.
That's right, exactly. And it's important to have this global cultural awareness when writing emails. So we've collaborated and written a blog together that we hope you'll read and learn more about the importance of this topic.
That's right. I'll put the link to the blog in the notes below this video. We've got a lot of good examples in there. Today, we're going to walk through a little bit about what makes it so important to consider culture when you communicate to someone in a different region, different industry, different generation, whatever it might be. So Val, can you tell us, first of all, why is it so important to think about culture when we're emailing somebody?
Right. When you're emailing, there's the lack of nonverbals or verbal communication. It's also important not only to send an email where it's understood, the message, but that it's also well received, that people are feeling good about the relationship, the work environment. So that's one of the best reasons, and not to offend people as well. Right.
Well, that rings true for me because in a lot of my classes, I get the question, well, what about the reader's interpretation? You know, what if someone doesn't interpret the words the way I meant it? Is that kind of something we would consider here?
Exactly, yes. And so one of the things that we explain in cultural awareness is the way people communicate. Are they communicating very directly or indirectly? What idioms are used? Even with English as the same language, there are certain words that are used and spelled differently. So communication is important in this writing emails.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little more about how readers' perceptions of one another might be impacted if we do something that seems completely regular, normal in our own world, but maybe we send that email and the perception is different on the other side?
Yes, exactly. So direct communicators prefer being assertive, getting to the task, where indirect communicators are more concerned about polite language. And so the perception of the two can differ because direct communicators may be perceived as blunt or aggressive or not really caring about the relationship between the colleagues or and then just the opposite, right, with the indirect communicators. Or the indirect communicators could be perceived by a direct communicator as, we call it kind of wishy-washy. That's an interesting word, but indirectness might be not confident, hiding something, and then the worst would be not being honest.
So even indirect communication could almost feel not honest on the other side?
Right, like they're hiding something, and when it could be more about showing respect to a person, an individual, or a group. So not pointing out errors, negative feedback in front of others. So saving face is important in many countries and cultures. So that's another important one.
Yeah, that came up exactly that. I wish you were there in my class because I was teaching a global team and they were saying, I'm not sure how direct to be. We sort of applied it in class to how active voice can feel direct, passive voice can feel indirect. But they were worrying about those very things, like how will I look on the other side? And people would say, I like to be concise and direct, but I don't want to sound harsh. Is the typical word, right?
Yeah, blunt, harsh, those words.
And so even though we advocate active voice often here in the US, I have learners around the world who say, that's going to sound aggressive. And so I'll purposefully bring in a little passive voice just to not seem so aggressive in my writing, even though that's kind of a no-no here in the US.
Yes, exactly. So in your communication, being culturally agile and shifting, where you need to, style stretching and understanding how to do that is important, and not expect someone to communicate the way you are.
Right.
So developing those skills is what we do.
That cultural flexibility in our communication, right? And it jives with everything we talk about here at the channel, because we always talk about starting by thinking about your reader. But we haven't talked as much about these cultural elements. So what's another maybe difference between the ways cultures communicate that could potentially offend a reader or not ring the way we intended?
Right. So when you begin an email, is it very relational or is it very task focused? Or do you go straight into the task, right? Or and also is it important to, when you meet someone? I know we're talking about emails, but have you developed a relationship first with someone? If it's a new work colleague or a client, some cultures prefer getting to know one another before the work,
right,
the task, right? Other cultures think it's inappropriate or not necessary to develop a relationship, right?
Yeah.
Let's just get to the task. We'll develop the relationship through the task that we are working on together. So this idea of task or relationship, how to start, you can see that in emails as well, especially if someone's new to a team or you're working with colleagues across many cultures. So I usually say start with the relational and then move to the task.
Yeah, I remember when you and I were in a meeting with someone from a culture that typically appreciates building a relationship. And in the beginning of the meeting, you took time to ask about his family and his life before we got to the agenda. Whereas sometimes people who don't value the relationship immediately say, okay, what's number one on the agenda? Which could leave other people saying, hey, I wanted to build some trust here first.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, that's very true. So if we're looking at these from three different cultural awareness points, the first one is direct and indirect that we talked about. The second one that we've given an example is around task or relationship. And then finally, the third one is more about formal and informal interactions. And so more, informal would be asking more personal information about someone versus, not asking to, staying very business focused, more formal. And so that's a very good example of the third cultural awareness point, formal and informal.
Right.
And, so
what would that look? I kind of understand if I'm in person how to act formal or less formal. What would it look like on the page, right? In an email, what does that really look like?
Right. So at the very beginning of an email, more formal would be, dear someone.
Your greeting.
Instead of hi.
Right.
Or
hey.
Hey.
Yeah.
Hey, someone.
Work in all
That's
cultures.
very informal, right?
Yeah.
And then also whether you use titles, last names or first names. I mean, most people think, okay, it's always first name basis around the world. Well, there are many cultures where a title, a last name, hierarchy is very important. And so in your emails, write appropriately so you don't offend someone, okay? And there's generational culture as well that impacts this third, formal and informal.
How formal we expect something to be. Yeah, I was in a class recently and we were talking about how I, an American, I have someone who writes to me and she doesn't say, hello, Erin, this is a colleague, or hi, Erin. She just says Erin, comma. And I feel like it's a little formal because I've known her for a while. But when I'm in a class with people around the world, they'll say, well, that is a sign of respect to just lead with the name and not some kind of hi, but just the name. And that's more formal and respectful for some people.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. And also in the email, just the tone. How are you expressing yourself? Is it more professional or more formal? Or do you know someone? You've worked together for a long time and you feel comfortable writing more informally. And so even many languages differentiate between the formal and informal you.
So true.
Right?
Right, like Spanish and
French and many other languages. And so English, there's one word for the word
the
you,
second
right?
person.
There isn't a respectful, formal, and we're acquainted. And so that also indicates, and And even the Google translates with language, it translates it to the informal, right? So not being aware of these important differences in culture is it's important in writing.
Well, you're making me think with the Google Translate example about AI, and that will be coming up in a future video where we're going to tackle how can you use ChatGPT and other AI when you're writing to a different culture? What do you need to adjust in there?
That's right. Good. What do you put in your prompts that will allow it to change it so that it's more formal or informal or more relational or more task focused? Or more direct and indirect, or polite or professional. So it's interesting. We've used the tool, and it can do many things, but you need to know what to ask it to do first.
Intention is key.
That's right.
Exactly.
Yes,
so you can expect us to be back with kind of a part 2 where we'll talk about adding that AI element. But from today, consider when you're emailing or talking, level of formality, level of directness, and whether you spend time trust building, relationship building, or just get right to the task. So many thanks to Valerie for joining us.
Yeah, it's always fun to be on your channel. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. We'll see you all soon. Have a great day.